Hello and welcome back to the Nasty Metal Productions channel for YouTube, and welcome to another album of the week. This is episode number 107, and since this was announced on the last week's episode of Album of the Week, which was for Come and Get It, the fourth album from Whitesnake, at the end of that one, again, I had announced what was going to be this week's pick, and since we are in this week, and you see the artwork, and you see, of course, the title, you know what it is. It is the second full-length album from new wave or British heavy metal cult legends. It is Spellbound from Tygers of Tang, which originally was released in April of 1981. And since we are still in the month of April, that means, depending on what day this was released on, because it's not really specified, it has at least hit its 40th anniversary. Yes, 40 years for definitely considered a classic album within the new wave of British heavy metal movement, and again, a classic record from Tygers of Tang. Again, it's usually also, in many fans' eyes, one of their crowning achievements. It is just a great record. So, without further adu, you know what? What I'm going to do here for at least, as far as when getting down the information for this album and bit of the backstory, I'm actually going to be reading some of this, at least from the MCA Years booklet. Again, the booklet that was featured in the MCA's Year set on Tygers of Tang, which at least has the albums like Wildcat up to About the Cage, and then of course a BBC disc. So, but again, in the booklet, it does detail a little bit of the backstory on leading into Spellbound. So I'm going to at least begin to where Wildcats left off. And since last year I had covered Wildcats already, it just is so perfect for me to really, again, to spotlight Spellbound and to just begin where that whole left off. So let me see if I can find the page here real quick. All right. So, again, here we go. The album was titled Wildcats. I'm just going to begin here. Again, incidentally, the song Wildcats on the record featured whatever. All right. Again, it came out on August 1980, which reaching an impressive number 18 in the UK chart, setting the seal on the band's reputation as one of the most exciting young metal acts around. The record had punch, energy, dynamism, not very used to saying that word, and no little quality. In a powerful year for rock and metal, this stood as one of the best debuts, but there were changes about to happen in the band. Firstly, they expanded to a 5-piece with the addition of a second guitarist. So now this is going to be quotes here. I think this could be from Rob Weir, who is explaining this. We'd open for bands like Saxon, Scorpions, and Iron Maiden, all of whom had 2 guitarists, explains Rob Weir. And it seemed to us that getting another guitarist in would help us with our sound. So we placed an advert looking for the right person. And about 80 people from all over the place applied to join. But John Sykes, who'd previously been with a band called Starfighter, was head and shoulders above everyone else, so we offered him the job. Sykes made his first live appearance with the band on August 24th, 1980, when they appeared at the Reading Festival on the same day as Whitesnake, funny enough, Def Leppard, Slade, Magnum, Girl, and Angel Witch. After this, he settled into the band as they went out on a headline tour to promote Wildcat. The tour was 95% sold out, says a proud Rob Weir, but soon afterwards in 1981, Cox decided he wanted to move on. He wanted to pursue his own thing. I'm not sure what was at the back of his mind, but it meant we were left searching for a new frontman. So we advertised for a singer and got about 120 applicants. I think we auditioned something like 60 in 3 days. But as soon as we heard John Deverell, we knew he was the man for us. In fact, we offered him the job on the spot. we all just knew he was right. John was Welsh, but moved up from the valleys to join us, and I ended up sharing a flat with John Sykes. So there we go. That's where we're now beginning to lead into now the story for Spellbound here. So they already just found they had gotten John Sykes already on August 24th, and then finally now John Devil replacing Jess Cox, who decided to just leave the band because he wanted to move on. That's where he decided to pursue his own solo career, which obviously didn't go anywhere. So there we go. Let's now begin here. The band then not only spent time getting the songs written for the next album, but also had 3 days at Guardian Studios in County Durham to demo everything. The studio was owned by Terry Gavigan, and he did an amazing job engineering the tracks. In fact, I'd go so far as to say that the guitar solos on the demo versions of the songs Gangland and Hellbound were better than the ones which finally made it onto the album. They just sounded so good. The demos were all sent down to Tygers, who was again chosen to produce the next album. So here we go. According to Rob Weir, why would we change anything? Insists Rob. We got on so well with him, and I loved what he'd done on the first album. So again, we headed to Morgan, where we spent something like 2.5 weeks working with Chris. The producer himself was impressed with the new additions. John Sykes was very excited to be joining the band and to work with me, as he was such a massive Gary Moore fan. Tygers had worked with Moore on a solo album, Back on the Streets, and he kept asking if I could get Gary to come by the studio. He was quite persistent, and Gary did come by. We had a great time jamming together, those two on guitar and me, and the old bass. John had tremendous respect for my production and engineering skills, which meant that I managed to coax some great playing out of him. John Devil had a large range and could sing in high or low register. Jess had a more mid-range department, but then both suited the albums they were on. So I guess some of that stuff was stated by the late Chris Tygers, so again, who has been sadly passed away. So it's interesting to note that this album has the one song Weir and Sykes ever wrote together, being Take It. So I guess from here on out, we'll then just move on, because of the album eventually got recorded on January 1981 at Morgan Studios, London. Again, released on April 1981 through MCA Records, at least throughout most of the world. And did sport at least some singles, being Hellbound and with Don't Give a Damn, which then was also had like a 12, or at least 2 7-inch record pressing with Hellbound, Don't Give a Damn, and then of course the second 7-inch on this special 2 7-inch vinyl pressing had, of course, 2 songs that didn't make the album, both being a version of Don't Take Nothing and Bad Times, which I think were old tracks that had Jess Cox on vocals, but finally got re-recorded. And then, of course, the second single for the album being Don't Stop By, with Slave to Freedom as the B-side, but a 12-inch vinyl pressing was released with the live version of Slave to Freedom and Raised on Rock, probably both recorded for the BBC. So there we go. And of course, I also should definitely mention, since obviously I was reading through some of that because since Chris Tygers had produced that Back on the Street album from Gary Moore, John Sykes was a big fan. So the idea that Gary Moore was jamming with Tygers of Tang, that would have been a cool freaking release. If some of that shit was even recorded, that would have been fantastic to hear. I would have loved how that would have sounded. And I think eventually, I believe Gary Moore did go on stage, I believe, with Tygers of Tang at the Reading Festival too. I think during this time period of 1981. So, that would have been just fantastic, I believe. Alright, So here we go. That's it. We are now in Spellbound. Again, released on April 1981. So this album here consists of at least 10 songs. We got about, and again, it all clocks in at 34 minutes and 27 seconds. So these songs are Gangland, Take It, Minotaur, which is a short 22-second instrumental, which leads into Hellbound, Mirror, Silver and Gold, Blackjack, The Story So Far, Tiger Bay, and then finally Don't Stop By. So there's your 10 songs, and again, this is really easily one of my favorite albums from Tygers of Tang. Actually, it could very be my number one favorite, though I do have a soft spot for the album that follows, Spellbound. But I mean, anything between these first three Tygers of Tang albums, to be quite honest, I really can't say which one's my absolute favorite, because I love both these first three. But there is definitely a magic that is caught on this album. And John Devil, even though he's again, as I believe Chris Singerides was putting it, and right, trying to comparing between John Devil and the former singer Jess Cox, he definitely has more of a higher range in his vocals. He's more, in many ways, a more objectively better singer, because he definitely can hit those high registers. He definitely just has a powerful voice to him, whereas Jess Cox was very mid-range, almost had a little bit of a, I wouldn't say guttural, but he just had a bit of more of a, almost kind of punkish, almost in some cases too. It was like almost a more, less abrasive Paul Di'Anno in some case. He just had a more gruffer, almost vocal style to him, or was a little rougher around the edges. He wasn't the most perfectly talented singer compared to John Devil, but he still had at least power that fit Wildcats, whereas John Devil, obviously being paired with John Sykes, who definitely adds a new dynamic to Tygers of Tang's sound on this album. It is no wonder why Phil Lynott and David Coverdale wanted this guy, because John Sykes is an absolute shredder. He's definitely, again, heads and shoulders above most of the musicians in Tygers of Tang, and in some cases maybe compared to some of the other new wave or British heavy metal bands. Though Kevin Hayborn from Angel Witch, I think, is a bit somewhat second behind John Sykes as being a great guitar player, or at least anyone in Saxon, like Paul Gwynn, I thought was the other great guitar player too. But John Sykes was definitely a more well-versatile guitar player, where he was more musical. You can hear him, even though he can shred. I mean, listen again to songs like Gangland, Take It, Hellbound, even on the ballad Mirror, which is actually one of the best power ballads, I think, when it comes to most of the new wave or British heavy metal bands. Because Tygers of Tang, I think, in some cases, when comparing between Tygers of Tang and Def Leppard, I think, if anything, as much as I do like the early material from Def Leppard, I do have to say that Tygers of Tang probably during this lineup with, again, John Deverill, Rob Weir, John James Sykes, again, John Sykes, that must be his full name there, Rocky on bass, and Brian Big Dick on drums. I think they were more this time actually ended up being better writers and musicians compared to Def Leppard, even though I think Def Leppard did have a great rhythm section, and in some cases a great twin guitar duo with their guys, but at the same time, when compared to at least Tygers of Tang as far as their strong point, John Deverill was definitely a much better singer compared to Joe Elliott, who in some cases can be patchy in some places, and he was definitely patchy on some of those early Def Leppard recordings, at least in some cases maybe up to High and Dry, but even on High and Dry, you can tell he was a little patchy. He wasn't, again, not the most well-talented singer. I think it is almost a shame that John Deverill didn't get that sort of big push compared to at least the guy, at least on the same level, because of in some cases, again, when you're trying to make an argument that John Deverill and Tygers of Tang were better just were better performers compared to Def Leppard is definitely not really an argument I would at least would debate with, because of I actually will end up agreeing with that. Even if I will state again that I do like those early Def Leppard stuff, but John Devil was even in some cases was definitely head and shoulders above Joe Elliott in the vocal department. If Def Leppard actually had John Devil as their singer instead of Joe Elliott, I think some of those songs would have sound, I guess in some cases, more and more appealing to a certain audience, even though as big as Def Leppard got, in some cases, John Devil was just in some cases, the stronger vocalist. But I digress. Let's again. He definitely this whole team of John Devil and John Sykes, which almost can be compared to when David Coverdale and Glenn Hughes had joined Deep Purple, because of it really added a whole new dynamic, and it really in some cases stretched a bit of the musical in terms of its quality. It really stretched it and expanded it even further, where everything it definitely is still melodic, but it's still heavy as well, still rocks. Again, just listen again to some of the scorchers like Gangland and Hellbound, and then of course there's like Tiger Bay, where they're just straight up rockers and just headbangers in some cases. And of course there's still great melodic rockers like Take It, which is just a really fun and enjoyable rocker. It's definitely live ready in some cases. This could have been a big hit along with Mirror. Mirror actually is surprising that it never got to be a bigger hit than it did, because of this is really, it's commercial, but it just comes off more natural. It's more organic in its construction and execution. It's a great ballad, and it definitely, I think, if this had been performed with Jess Cox, it probably would have ruined whatever it had going. Even though it would have been interesting and quite an experience, I think again when John Devil, he just owns some of the song along with John Sykes. They were definitely became the overall sound of this era of Tigers of Pantang that began with this album. But there's other good songs. Again, like I do like Silver and Gold, which is more of a 70s style rocker. You can definitely can hear that Thin Lizzy influence on this one too. And then with like The Story So Far, which is also a very more upbeat rocker. Again, by more commercially in its execution compared to Take It, but it still is a very good track. And then finally Don't Stop By, which was the second single off of this album, is also a very interesting song. It does have a very powerful feel to it. It is definitely a cool atmosphere. I do like this song too, and it's interesting that it ends the album, because again, you probably would have expected them to end it with at least a straight up hard rocker, but what they ended it with is more of a in some cases, a more, I wouldn't say mellow, but just has more of a calmer dynamic to it, but still is very epic in its own right, and it's just great. And almost, for some reason, I get a little bit of a Queen style vibe. I guess somewhere between Queen and Thin Lizzy almost with this track. It just has a very atmosphere to it, especially with some of the overall tones of it. It is definitely a fine way to end the album. Of course, let's definitely talk about some of the stuff that didn't make the album, because of, again, we've got some of the B-side stuff that was, like I just stated, on like the Hellbound 7-inch singles, and which had, again, songs that were recorded on during these sessions, but didn't really get to make any of the album. Like, again, Don't Give a Damn, which is a fine hard rocker. I actually really do enjoy that one. Don't Take Nothing is actually a very cool version. I do like that. Singles for Bad Times are all very good. But then there's also two other songs which made it onto at least the bonus, as bonus tracks to the reissues of Spellbound, being a cover of the Small Faces' All or Nothing and It Ain't Easy, which was a studio outtake that was previously unreleased. They're both good. I think, again, they do a very good job covering the Small Faces track, All or Nothing, which was Steve Marriott, the late Steve Marriott. And they do a very cool version, though. I don't know. I mean, I can understand why I probably didn't make the album, because again, just like how they had covered Tush from ZZ Top for the Wildcat album, it's understandable why that didn't make it. Because again, even though they wanted to do a studio versions anyways of some of these tracks, but at the same time, I think when it came down to at least to constructing the album, I think in some cases trying to shoehorn a cover probably would have been almost a bad idea, because of what would have been almost make them think like, oh geez, they're starting to look for that really big hit, because again, covers always end up being a big hit. Quite Right, for example, and whatnot. Even though Girl Skull actually had scored a hit with their cover of Tush, but so in some cases maybe it made sense. Whatever. Still, it's fine, but the other track, It Ain't Easy, is also not too bad. It's very interesting. I think, and in some cases, when the whole argument of bonus tracks being kind of a bad idea for albums, because some people definitely have, I've really seen a lot of opinions over the course of the years about how bad bonus tracks are for albums in some cases. Like, it's unnecessary. But I think Spellbound might, for its reissue, I think might have some of the best bonus tracks in some cases, because it actually fits along with the albums. They were from the sessions. It actually ends up, it's like a longer version of Spellbound. So I actually kind of enjoy some of those bonus tracks, especially like Don't Give a Damn and Bad Times. Again, being again, though from the, it says the audition tapes of 1979, but it's actually a re-recorded version of it, according to Wikipedia. Idiots. It's actually, again, it's a B-side from the Hellbound single. Alright, so there we go. So, after Spellbound, they obviously go out to tour for the album, and again, end up playing, I think, even again, the Reading Festival too, and they still end up, again, touring and so on, and playing with plenty of other bands. They're just touring for it. And then eventually, they'll end up going in the studio to record their next album, which would be released on the same year as Spellbound. Again, just some months after it. And that would be the lead into Crazy Nights, which I'll eventually end up talking about anyway. So I'm going to save my opinions for that Album of the Week video. So there you go. There it is. Spellbound from Tygers of Tang reaching its 40th anniversary. If you have any memories of growing up with this album, or any memories of when you probably heard this album many years after this had been released, because again, for those who are diehard fans of the Wildcat album, I don't have to really mention any names. Again, if you have any memories of just this album in general, you can leave them in the comments section below, whether or not they would be negatives or positives. You can leave them in the comments section below. But for those who haven't heard this album and are very curious of Tygers of Tang and just overall new wave or British heavy metal full-length albums, you know what? I recommend checking out this album. I mean, if you want an album that kind of a little bit is accessible to you, I think that this is a good album to check out. I think you'll definitely like this album, especially if you like the more straight-up guitar-driven stuff, or you definitely are a big John Sykes fan and are getting into his stuff with Thin Lizzy and Whitesnake. This is a good album to go to really check out, because you really do get some of his best work here, in my opinion. Even though his stuff he did with at least Thin Lizzy on Thunder and Lightning, and even Slide It In from Whitesnake, I think are all good, even though John Sykes only contributed to the US version of Slide It In, because it was a different mix, slightly different recording compared to the one that was released in the UK with Mel Galley on guitars and Mickey Moody. So there we go. That's in comparison. Still, if you want to get a good idea of John Sykes' early stuff, this is a good album to also really check out, to get a good taste of his really early stuff. Alright, so that kind of does it for this episode. It's time to at least announce what is going to be next week's Album of the Week. So, let me look at my scheduling here. What is going to be next week's Album of the Week pick, huh? What is it going to be? Let's take a look. Oh, wow. It's going to be another new wave or British heavy metal album. It is the debut full-length album from Vardis, The World's Insane. Can't wait to talk about that one. That is definitely a good album, though. Very good album. So with that, I hope all of you enjoyed this episode of Album of the Week. Hope all of you enjoyed. This is Every Thrasher Sam out. And I'll see you all later. Take care, everyone.